Okay, today we are starting our next assignment, which is our first vector assignment. The output of this assignment will be entirely vector-based, but we can use a variety of ways to get there. So this is assignment 6, and it is a logo mashup using symbols or images that already exist in the culture and kind of adding our own take on it or combining them together somehow. Now right now it's empty, but I have a theme in mind. So I'm going to start with sketches. So instead of starting in Illustrator, I'm going to actually start in Photoshop. You can just use your sketchbook for this. But good logo design is always clear in its content. So you want to start with a really clear theme in mind. So I'm going to start just a new sketchbook page. Use my standards, 8 inches by 10 inches by 350 pixels per inch. I want RGB color. And I'm going to call this my logo, let's see, secure your mask sketch. I've actually been asked to work on a theme that is secure your own mask first. So I'm going to write that up at the top. And that's supposed to make you think of these kind of safety designs, these safety things you get at the airport where they tell you to put on your oxygen mask with the little baggie coming from it before you assist children or others. So this might be kind of a sketch of a design for that. Almost an infographic, right? And it's going to have to be informed by some research. I need to see what those masks look like. And I've already done that, so I know that there's kind of tabs you pull. And so they always show people tightening the tabs. Okay, so how do I make this kind of clean so you can really tell what's going on? And maybe make it a little bit more visually engaging than those airline cards. Well, I had a few ideas. My first idea was to do something like George Washington on the dollar bill. Here he is with his big wig. And the only difference would be you're used to seeing George Washington, right? It's like a mashup of images we've already seen, but he has the mask on. So kind of showing this hero with the air mask. And I might use the kind of frame that's on the dollar bill, this really ornate, decorative frame, and then the letters might be here, though you don't need to have words in your logo. But secure your own mask first, right? Sketch number 1. Sketch number 2, I was thinking, well, wouldn't it be neat if there was panic going on, like a plane crashing, right? Because this is why we use these. And the plane is breaking in half. And maybe we add to the chaos, just make it horrific, and there's people falling out. And then there's puffy little clouds. And then the one person that remembered to secure their own mask first has his air mask attached, even though it might not be connected to anything. But he is just lounging comfortably in his chair while all this chaos goes on behind him. Now, this might work well for a poster, but as kind of an immediate graphic, something like a logo or a t-shirt design or something, it's not direct enough. It's too much narrative involved. But I did like that idea and I mocked that up. And then the last idea I had, it took some imagery I like from the history of art. And in the 60s, there's a New York pop artist named Roy Lichtenstein whose kind of first work that really kind of made a mark on the public consciousness was paintings of war comics. And he had one where a plane was exploding. And this often happens to me in the sketching process. I'll try one idea, I'll look up some reference, and it leads to a new idea. But he has these very graphic explosions. And then he even created just explosion paintings. And he's also known for doing kind of comic book, romance comic panels. And so I was going to treat it like a mashup between his romance comic images and his explosions, and then also add on the kind of airline infographic mask. So that's the idea I decided to actually go with. It's central, but it's got a lot of excitement to its shape. And so it would be kind of a face in here with the mask on, but looking a little bit more illustrative and decorative than the usual. Okay, so once you have your sketches, and you're going to be uploading your sketches, save those to the desktop. Now I'm going to do some research. And you do that with Google image searches. And I'm researching kind of all of my ideas. So there are these. There are kind of the airline safety cards, and then this is a cartoon of that. Like, what do you really do when there's a problem? I don't know. Probably not that. There's the schematics. I actually found some of the patent office blueprints for different oxygen masks. That's a little too technical, but that might be a different way to go. Sometimes the reference you find will give you ideas. I looked up a lot of George Washington stuff. I looked up kind of what do the borders on the dollar bills look like and how I can make those into vectors. Even just looked at some t-shirts that use that image and how they simplify it. One I really liked in that search was Ben Franklin with an oxygen, or with a gas mask, though it's not the same idea. It's kind of a compelling image. Then I found lots and lots of these kind of infographics, and they're all pretty dull. Come on. Showing this procedure, but that gives me a good sense of how they work, right? And as you're working on it, I actually build, using my Photoshop compositing skills, I composite it together. So one I came up with was this. And that's no drawing of my own, it's just compositing different things I found through Google image searches, but that's the relaxed guy idea. And then I tried it kind of with the text, made it more poster-like. And that could work as a poster, but I don't think it's what I want for this kind of direct focus. And I found this, which I think has the best kind of clear image of the mask and the way it works, this image right here. So I steal the mask from that frame. And then Roy Lichtenstein did tons of these hand-painted pop art ladies from comics. And I just love the hairdo on this. It seems perfectly made for a vector with all of these clean, solid shapes. And so I composited that with the mask and played around with it a little bit and got this. And so how do you get to there? Well, I'm using an image like this, right? And then I'm using tools to really, like levels, to really brighten it up and darken the darks and simplify it so I can just see what the black and white shapes look like. And that's a good way to go. So then, this is how I like to work. I started to composite that image together. This is still before I've drawn anything, with explosions in the background. And this is one of my favorite of Roy Lichtenstein's explosion paintings, which he's done in several ways. And it has that kind of retro vibe, and I added some more. But this is getting too muddy. It's losing its direction, right? So this is then what I do. I print out kind of the best design I have so far, and then I draw pencils from it, just kind of tracing over it. And I did some for the explosion too. I hope they're in this, but they might be somewhere else. Let me see. I was just doing this last night, because sketching is fun. Oh, there they are. Okay. And I made these. I'm just going to pull these onto the desktop so I don't lose track of them. I tend to collect so much reference, I have to use naming conventions just to not lose everything. But then I drew with pencil, you know, this image and kind of perfected it to what I want, and I gave her clothes, but I like this kind of funky 50s-like neckline using some of the bubbles as almost like pearls or decoration. And I moved the hands and I redrew them a little bit. I positioned the arrows, put a little bit of texture on the mask so it's up to this level. And then I do the same thing with the explosion. So this is kind of my version of the explosion. And since it's drawn from my design where she fits nicely into it, some areas are left blank and she's going to fit into that nicely. But I want to do them as separate vectors so I have a lot of versatility. So how do I make this clean and make it something that will live trace as a vector easily? Well, there's two methods. First, I can just take these pencils as is. I'll show you with her first. And I can open them directly with Illustrator. And because it's a JPEG, it will immediately give you the image trace options. And I could try to trace it, like say, okay, this is a black and white logo. But it's a really complicated image. And because it's sketched with pencil, you'll see how muddy that is and how not very strong. And then if I hit expand, I have this mess of vectors that are pretty hard to work with. And it also gives me all the white space as well as the black space. So I don't really want that. I want it to work as kind of just a silhouette, simple shape. So instead of that, when you bring in your sketch, what you can usually do in Illustrator is simply draw over the top of it. So I'm going to lock that. I make a new layer. And now on top of this, I'm going to start using the pen tool. This is if you want to be really exact. And I can just make it with fills. And I can start plotting curves. Slowly. And getting it to be what I want. And this used to be the only way you used to be able to do Illustrator. So if I was to just complete that one piece of hair for you, so you can kind of see how that works. It might look like that. And then I can modify it with my pencil. And play with the curves. What I love about the pencil tool is you can redraw every line. Okay. And so build up and build up. I can even just freehand new shapes, but the pencil tool will help them stay smooth. But like cutting out paper, it's better to start with your big shapes first. So for me, this isn't usually my favorite option, to be building it up over and over and over again. And that would take a long time with all these shapes, though it would work well for simpler logo designs just fine. So this is what I do. I use what I know well and I'm comfortable with, and I use Photoshop. So instead of bringing it into Illustrator when it's still a sketch, I take that sketch into Photoshop and I make it as clean as I can through levels. And even a pencil sketch does a great job.